What's up, guys? Welcome to this week's Best Bets episode for UFC 329, Conor McGregor versus Max Holloway 2, where I'll be discussing the most confident picks, the lock of the week, the underdog of the week, and some parlays that I like. It's currently 4th of July, so happy 4th of July if you guys are celebrating. Let's get right into the most confident picks for this card, where we got Adrian Yanez, Luke Riley, and Gable Stevenson. Starting off with Adrian Yanez fighting Cody Garbrandt. At this stage in their career, I have to favor Adrian Yanez. He looked excellent in his last fight against Ricky Simon. And although it was ruled a draw, I thought Yanez clearly did enough to win the fight. He had the cleaner striking, landed the bigger shots, and even dropped Simone in the third round. It looked like the best version of Yanez we've seen in a while. On the other hand, Cody Garbrandt, he's coming off of a win that came under unusual circumstances. His opponent was repeatedly deducted points for groin strikes, which ultimately swung the fight into Cody's favor. From a pure performance standpoint, I don't think Garbrandt looked like the better fighter at all in that fight. Stylistically in this matchup, I think it favors Yanez. Yanez is the cleaner, more technical boxer with excellent combinations, sharp counters, and high volume attacks. I expect him to control the pocket exchanges, use his jab effectively, and consistently beat Garbrandt to the punch. Cody, he still has some speed and explosive moments, but I don't think his timing is what it once was. He may find success with a few calf kicks early on, but over the course of the fight, I expect Yanez's boxing to take over. So I'm picking Adrian Yanez to have the cleaner boxing, the sharper timing, and more consistent offense, which should lead him to a victory here. Now moving on to Luke Riley versus Kai Kamaka. Look, I like Luke Riley a lot in this matchup. He looked impressive since joining the UFC. He scored a highlight reel knockout in his debut before putting together a dominant striking performance against Michael Aswell in his next fight after that. Riley, he fights with constant pressure, throws with bad intentions, and keeps his foot on the gas from start to finish. Kai Kamaka, he's a tough, durable fighter who likes to fight at a high pace. He relies on volume, boxing, movement, and cardio to outwork opponents. And his best chance here is to close the distance, work in the clinch, and make this a grinding fight. The problem is that Riley has the physical and technical advantages here. He's the taller, longer fighter with faster hands, cleaner footwork, and more dynamic striking. I expect him to control the range with straight punches and calf kicks, gradually slowing Kai down while forcing him into desperate entries. So as Kai starts chasing the fight, I can see Riley timing him with sharp counters and landing the more damaging shots throughout the fight. So I'm picking Luke Riley to have the superior striking, the better range management, and the heavier shots landed. It should earn him a victory here. Now moving on to Gable Stevenson versus Elisha Ellison. This feels like a showcase fight for Gable Stevenson's long-awaited MMA debut. He's an Olympic gold medalist in freestyle wrestling, an elite athlete with incredible explosiveness, strength, and athleticism, and his wrestling alone should allow him to dictate where this fight takes place. The UFC also gave him a favorable matchup. Elisha Ellison, that guy's been finished in both of his professional losses, one by knockout and one by submission, right? So, and he doesn't appear to have the wrestling needed to keep Stevenson off of him. So Elisha Ellison's best chance is to keep this fight standing, use his slight reach advantage, and try to catch Stevenson with punches as Stevenson tries to close the distance. But that's much easier. Excuse me. That's much easier said than done against someone with Stevenson's level of wrestling. So I expect Stevenson to waste no time at all, secure an explosive takedown early on, establish top control, and overwhelm Ellison with ground and pound. So I'm picking Gable Stevenson to use his elite wrestling. It should lead him to a dominant first round finish in his UFC debut. Now moving on to lock of the week. Lock of the week, Loner Kavanagh. Look, I'm very high on Loner Kavanagh. I genuinely believe he has championship potential, and nothing I've seen lately has changed my mind. I even picked him against Brandon Moreno as a massive underdog. I thought the odds were way off. His speed, timing, and footwork, I think they're elite, and I felt they matched up perfectly against Moreno. The only real blemish on Kavanagh's resume is the knockout loss he has to Charles Johnson, but I actually think that loss made him a better fighter. He spent too much energy chasing takedowns that weren't there in that fight. He slowed down, and eventually he got caught. In his next fight, he looked much more composed, fought at his own pace, and relied on his striking, and instead of forcing the wrestling. It was a huge improvement. And I think that same version of Kavanagh shows up here. No, Royval, he's always dangerous. Obviously, he pushes a relentless pace, throws high volume, creates chaos, and has the size advantage. His best chance is to drag Kavanagh into a wild fight, wear him down, and look for scrambles or submissions. The problem is Kavanagh doesn't fight that way. He's patient, technical, and incredibly fast. He manages distance really well, picks his shots carefully, and has outstanding footwork. I think he'll use his speed, his leg kicks, and precise boxing to catch Royval every time he tries to crash into range. So as long as Kavanagh sticks to the game plan, kind of like what we saw against Moreno, I think he controls the striking exchanges and shows the gap in speed and technique. So I'm picking Loner Kavanagh to have the superior speed, the cleaner striking, and the better fight IQ. It should earn him a convincing win here. Now moving on to Underdog of the week. Mario Bautista, the underdog of the week. I'm very high on Mario Bautista. I think he's one of the most underrated fighters in the division because of how complete his game has become. He's constantly mixing together striking, clinch work, and takedowns, making him incredibly difficult to prepare for. I backed Bautista when he was an underdog against Patchy Mix, and he proved he belonged at the top of the division and not Patchy Mix, right? He continues to impress with wins over Patchy Mix and Vinicius Oliveira, and even in his loss to Umar Nurmagomedov, he had moments of success, including dropping Umar with a flying knee early in that fight. Corey Sandhagen, he did submit Mario Bautista the first time they fought, but that was years ago in Mario's debut. Bautista, he has evolved, tremendously since then, and he's looked like a completely different fighter. Sandhagen, he is still one of the best technical strikers in the division. He's creative, fights well at range, and does a great job setting up traps. But we've also seen relentless pressure and constant level changes give Sandhagen problems. Like Merab Dvalishvili, he had success overwhelming Sandhagen with wrestling, clinch work, and non-stop pressure. And I think Bautista can create similar issues. Mario never lets opponents settle into a rhythm. He'll strike, he'll clinch, then wrestle, then immediately return to the boxing. If the takedowns isn't there, the non-stop pace forces opponents to constantly think instead of letting them fight comfortably, right? And I expect Sandhagen to have success at range early on, but I think Bautista's pressure, versatility, and willingness to mix every aspect of MMA together will gradually take over this fight. So I'm picking Mario Bautista to have the relentless pressure, constant level changes, and a more well-rounded attack. It should be enough to outwork Sandhagen, in my opinion. So Mario Bautista is the underdog of the week. Now moving on to the parlay section. The Saftey Lock. Starting off with the Saftey Lock at minus 130. Kavanagh and Yanez. This is built around two fighters who should have the cleaner boxing in their matchup. Kavanagh has elite speed, footwork, and distance management, while Yanez is the more polished striker against Garbrandt at this stage of their careers, right? Both of them have clear advantages on the feet, and should be able to control the pace of their fights here. So that's the Saftey Lock, minus 130, Kavanagh and Yanez. Moving on to the ultimate lock, Kavanagh and Riley at minus 115. Kavanagh, he's bringing in that elite movement and precision striking, while Luke Riley has looked like one of the brighter prospects in this division. Riley's pressure, his range management, and heavier shots should be the difference against Kai Kamaka. You're getting two young fighters with momentum at nearly even money. So now moving on to the juice boost at plus 150, Gondra and Whitaker. Ryan Gondra is an explosive prospect with serious fighting ability and should have the athletic edge in his matchup. I'm not entirely impressed with his opponent, Zachary Reese. And now moving on with mixing Ryan Gondra up with Robert Whitaker. Robert Whitaker is making his move up in weight, but he's still one of the most technical fighters on the roster. Pairing a dangerous prospect like Ryan Gondra with a proven veteran, it gives this parlay solid plus money value at plus 150. So now moving on to the four most confident picks. Kavanagh, Yanez, Riley, and Stevenson. This is the core confidence parlay at plus 140. Kavanagh has the superior speed, timing, and striking. Yanez, the cleaner boxing and better overall form in this stage of his career. And then Luke Riley, more dangerous pressure fighter with better range management. And then Stevenson, Olympic level wrestling, it should allow him to dictate the entire fight, right? So each fighter has a clear stylistic path to victory, making this your strongest multi-leg parlay. So now moving on to the fun duo parlay, Pinas and Alessandro Costa at plus 110. It's a fun parlay. Damian Pinas, I think he should have the striking advantage and can control where this fight takes place. While Alessandro Costa, I feel like he's the more complete striker with power to expose um, his opponent in this matchup. So Cody Durden is his opponent, right? So two well-rounded fighters at plus money. It's making this a fun value play. Now moving on to Underdog City parlay, Mario Bautista and King Green. This is the upset special. You know, Bautista has the relentless pressure, wrestling, and pace to make life difficult for Corey Sandhagen, while King Green has the veteran experience to weather Terrence McKinney's early storm before taking over if the fight extends. You know, both underdogs, they have realistic paths to victory. I see King Green staying composed, weathering the storm, and then picking up the pace as the fight goes on. I feel like this parlay, it makes for an attractive high payout sprinkle, and I do think it is worth a sprinkle. So that does conclude this week's best bets for UFC 329 Conor versus Max 2. Hope you guys found this helpful. Till next time, peace.